Okay, this is the Baltimore City Council Budget and Appropriations Committee. We're here this evening for Council Resolution 18-0091R, budget oversight hearings for the Baltimore City Police Department, which will be starting monthly. We are also here for a bill which will be held in the Public Safety Committee immediately following this hearing, which is chaired by Councilman Scott, and that's Council Resolution 18-0092R, which are going to be the monthly council stat meetings for the Baltimore City Police Department. Before we begin, a couple ground rules. If you have a phone, could you please turn it to silent, vibrate, off, or some other setting which does not make noise, please. This hearing is being is on Comcast channel 25 right now, and is also being streamed live on www.charmtv.tv/watch-live. If you are going to be testifying, please make sure that you speak clearly into the microphone like this. Otherwise, the folks that are at home are unable to hear you. I'm joined to my immediate left by Vice Chair of the Committee, Councilman Leon Pinkett, 7th District. Councilman Brandon Scott, 2nd District, member of the committee. Councilman Chris Burnett, 8th District. Councilwoman Mary Pat Clark, 14th District. Then to my right, Council President Bernard C. Jack Young. Councilwoman Sharon Green Middleton, Vice President of the Council from the 6th District and member of the committee. Councilman Isaac Yitzi Schleifer, 5th District, member of the committee. Councilman Bill Henry, 4th District, member of the committee. To my immediate right is Marguerite Curran, staff to the committee. We're also joined by Kara Kuntz, Legislative Director for Council President Young, and Rebecca Tabb, Attorney for the City Council. Representing Mayor Catherine Pugh is Karen Stokes and Karan Banks from the Mayor's Office of Government Relations. Before we begin, I'm going to pass it over to Council President Jack Young for brief introductory remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, in light of what took place on Monument Street as it relates to the police officer and the altercation with the man, I think it really causes great concern for this council. I think it causes great concern with the community when we're trying to rebuild police-community relations. It's like the officer just lost it. But, you know, this is the type of behavior we can't have. Police officers are supposed to be professional at all times. They're supposed to have thick skin like we do as council members. And I think it set a bad example to the rest of the public. But I want to commend the interim police for, you know, doing what he did swiftly. I know a lot of people call for the officer to be fired. I understand that he resigned. Whether that's true or false, I really don't know. But in order for us to continue to build the community trust, we have to make sure that our officers at all times are acting in a professional manner. I know it's tough, and I feel for the officers, but you took an oath to protect and serve, and the citizens are telling us that it's not protect and serve. So we have to do a better job as police officers to make sure that the public understand that we are there to protect and serve. And then on the other hand, the community must make sure that they give the police officers the respect that they need because they are the law. And I'm just a little, I don't know what to think because I never thought I would see that. Since the incident that happened on Green Mountain North when one of the officers and another gentleman was in an altercation where the officer beat the guy up. These are the kind of things that give us a black eye because that video went all over Facebook. It's probably in every city. And we can't continue to have the black eye shined on Baltimore. We got a lot of positive things going on in Baltimore, and this is just one incident that will give us another black eye to people around the country. So I just want to thank the interim commissioner for acting swiftly, and the investigation shouldn't be long because it wasn't that long of a little incident, and I think we need to do a better job of training our officers how to handle difficult situations. And I know sometimes it can be frustrating when you're trying to do your job. You got people hurling insults at you, but still we have to act professional. So, Mr. Chair, thank you for giving me that opportunity to speak to that issue, because everybody is talking about that. And they're saying on the news that it's the elected officials that allow this to happen, and they blaming the mayor and every member of this council for what the officers have done. But I keep referring back to the police department is a state agency, that we really can't tell them exactly what to do unless we just hold their budget. But I just think that we need to make sure that we have better training of how to act in a difficult situation, so we don't put our officers at risk and they don't put the community members at risk as well. So, Mr. Chair, thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. President. We've also been joined by Councilwoman Shannon Sneed, 13th District, member of the committee, and Councilman Ryan Dorsey, 3rd District. Before we get started, I'm also going to I'd like to move to Councilman Leon Pinkett, who's the lead sponsor of the budget oversight hearings. Councilman Pinkett.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to second the comments that were made by Council President, and as he's done, I want to commend the command staff of the police department for acting swiftly as it relates to this incident. But as Council President says, this is a visible example that more training needs to be, more resources need to be put in place to properly prepare our officers to be the kinds of citizens that we expect them to be at all times in the public. They are a reflection not only of the city, but they're a reflection of the constituents throughout the public. This initial hearing is focused on the overtime as it relates to the police department. And in my perspective, there are two of the chief responsibilities of local government are, one, making certain that our communities are safe for all citizens, and two, practicing sound fiscal stewardship of the resources made available to us on behalf of the citizens. In the case of the Baltimore Police Department, those two mandates are intimately linked because the efficiency with which the agency manages its budget has direct ramifications on the public safety outcomes in our communities. Over the past several years, it would be safe to say that the police department has severely challenged the public's confidence in their ability to manage their budget, especially as it relates to overtime expenditures. It has become a common occurrence of the city's budget cycle that we as the council are requested to reconcile these overages that are most of the time in the excess of tens of millions of dollars through supplementary appropriations. Most recently in this current year, the request was for $21 million. We as a city cannot continue to operate in that fashion. Despite the Budget Committee holding quarterly hearings on this matter, the expenditures typically occur before any remedies or recommendations can be offered to address this issue. These monthly hearings are designed for the council to have an opportunity to fulfill its responsibility to the citizens of Baltimore by holding the police department accountable to their budget like we would do for any other agency of the city. I thank Chairman Costello, Council President, and my colleagues for supporting this hearing, and look forward to working with the police department and the budget department as we make efforts to efficiently monitor these expenditures and implement strategies to address these structural deficits in the staffing and funding of this critical city service. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Next, I'd like to go to Councilman Brandon Scott, who's lead sponsor of the bill that we'll be hearing for the second part of today's proceedings. Councilman Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'd like to also echo the sentiments of the Council President and Councilman Pinkett, and just in reference to this Saturday's incident, which I think was a cowardly assault on a citizen in the city of Baltimore. It goes against everything that public service is supposed to represent, and it's another clear example, in my opinion, of why we need structural change for BPD, including implementing the recommendations of the Citizens Oversight Task Force and adhering to the requests of this city council that we've made for multiple times for local control, so that we can enact the policies that are needed to rein in these kind of behaviors and change the structural way that these things are handled. This incident threatens to undo the work of the consent decree team and distracts folks from the city of Baltimore from the crime fight. Baltimore has a very, very, very unacceptable rate of violent crime in that neighborhood where this incident happened, that they have 2 recent homicides, and anything that distracts us from that is a tragedy, in my opinion. And public servants should not act the way that this officer acted this weekend in a cowardly manner. And while crime is down this year, it's still significantly higher than the recent years of 2014 and 2011, where we saw record lows in the city of Baltimore. And while we can compare to last year, that's not something that I believe that we should do. And we'll discuss more about that later on today, because we know that Baltimore can and must do better in reducing violent crime. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. One last thing before we begin. I will add and join in the sentiments of my colleagues and Mr. President that this weekend's event was absolutely disgusting. There is absolutely no excuse for what happened. I would like to commend Interim Commissioner Tuggle for swift action. And while there is a need for an investigation, I would say I'm happy to say the least that that officer is no longer with our police department. This underscores a critical need for a laser focus on recruiting and on training within our department. And it also leads to this issue of local control. And I suspect that many of the issues that are going to come up when we're discussing the budget and budget controls are things that we would better be equipped on the city council and also the mayor as well to deal with if we had local control of our police department. One of the things that I hope that we can accomplish with the budget portion of these hearings, and I commend Councilman Pinkett for introducing this resolution, is to have a focus on sworn and civilian vacancies throughout every set of 2 pay periods as we come to the public and have these hearings. The number of those officers and civilians deployed to each unit in each district, the amount of overtime costs so that we're tracking that on a consistent basis so we know what's working, what's not working, and especially a focus on our academy class statuses. The number of officers or trainees that are in each class when the start and finish date is, as well as upcoming academy classes so that we know whether or not we're on target to get the right number of officers in those classes so that we can begin to cut down on this overtime issue. So with that, we'll get started. I'm going to turn it over to Chief Gillis from the Police Department to begin. Chief, if you could please introduce everyone from command staff that is here, and then I believe you either have a spreadsheet or presentation to show us and some, or
I do. Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, members of the council.
Mike, Jim. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Pull it up more. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, and Mr. Chairman, and members of the 2 committees and other council members, thank you for having us here today. I think you all are absolutely right. I think that this past weekend and this hearing itself today kind of represent where we are in terms of an intersection between the Constitution overshadowing everything that we do as the government and interacting with our communities, community engagement, better training for our officers, and better technology for managing the officers and the other collateral parts of the police department and the agency. All of those things are parts, or essentially what the consent decree is mandating on the police department. And so we from the police department appreciate the partnership with you all from the legislative branch to help us through this process right now. And on behalf of the commissioner, I'm sorry that he's not here right now. He's actually has a conflict, and it has to do with a meeting with the Judge Bradar on the consent decree tomorrow, who he's meeting with. And so all of this is very relevant to everything that everybody is talking about right now. Mr. Chairman, as you said, my name is Jim Gillis. I'm the Chief of Staff of the Police Department. With me is the Fiscal Director, Paula Williams, and I think Ms. Williams is going to put up the presentation that we have today, and it's really just some spreadsheets to go through some of the financials with you all that you had requested. Also with us is Chief Stephen Odell. Behind us in this row, when we get to the operations side of things, the Chief of Patrol, Darren Garrity, is here. He had to step out for a second. Lieutenant Colonel Rich Worley is here. Lieutenant Colonel Rob Jackson, and Colonel Byron Conaway is here as well. And what we were going to do was flip when we got to the other part of the hearing, but whatever is the preference of the council, obviously.
We'll do the, and everyone from command staff's welcome to take a seat in the front with a mic. We will start with the budget portion of this first, and then we'll swap over.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Real quick, just if the three folks, not Karen and Karan, if you could just introduce yourselves for those watching or here today.
Sure. Hi, good afternoon. Bob Sanamy, Budget Director.
Mr. Chair and members of the City Council, Drew Vetter, Director of the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice.
Good evening. Kendra Parlock, Director, Mayor's Office, Sustainable Solutions.
Thank you. BPD.
Good evening, Council President and all council members. Again, my name is Director Williams, and I will be sharing with you a summary of our financial report, which we will provide monthly to you. For the month of July, we saw that there were 220 vacant sworn positions. With that, there are 79 civilian vacant positions altogether. BPD had 299 vacant positions as far as the position budget for fiscal 2019. We have in a line item called 408, medical, which are individuals that are on medical leave. They are doing the evaluation process on if they will retire. We see that there are 84 of these persons that have in line of duty medical related issues, and an additional 19 that have medical issues that are not related to the line of duty. Also, medical line of duty, we have, these are maybe short-term to long-term individuals, 31 members in the line of duty, again, 13 members that have issues that are not in the line of duty. And we have officers that are on light duty. Altogether, there are 265 officers on light duty. During the month of July, we saw that we had 10 members that went into retirement. We had 10 members that resigned, and we had 2 terminations. New hires for the month of July, there were 11 sworn and 13 civilians.
Hang on. When we say 13 civilians, those are non-sworn officers that are filling civilian positions, not sworn officers filling civilian positions, correct?
They are non-sworn positions.
I know they're non-sworn, but I'm saying the bodies that are filling those positions, are they sworn officers or are
For the new hires,
Yes.
they're strictly civilians.
Thank you.
As far as information for the Academy class, we have Academy Class 2017-04, which began December 4th, 2017, and the anticipated graduation is October 2018. That class has 42 members. Class 2018-01, starting February of 2018 with a graduation date of January 2019. That class has 38 members. Class 2018-02, an anticipated start date of, it was May 2018. The graduation date is April 2019. And class 2018-03, anticipation date, and it was July 13th, 2018, with graduation date of May 2019. Altogether, our cadet class is at 147. Moving forward, we wanted to look at the vacancy overtime projections. And as far as the salaries that are vacant in the budget for July, we have a breakdown that there is about $20 million of salary for vacant positions that are sworn and civilian positions. And with that also being said, the benefit amounts to about maybe $15,000 per person, and that is about $4.4 million. And so we show that there is about $24 to $25 million in the budget for positions that are vacant as of the end of July, July 31st, 2018. And so what we anticipate in doing is that we have a spread, which is from July 2018, and it will go through June of 2019. And we just allocated over each individual month the anticipated amount of salary and benefit costs to those particular members. And for July, we have the actual figures again, which is positions that we have not filled. But when we get down to the overtime projection, we see that we have anticipated, or we have said, that we would approximately spend $1.7 million per pay period. And we found that in July, we have actual projections for July. In July, we only spent about, I think it was 1.5 per pay period. And so we are at $3 million for the month of July in actual. And that is the budget. The budget was 1.58. Any questions? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
And so at this point in time, and this will be a rolling budget, and so our overtime, we say deficit, we're saying that with the projections and the actual, today we are saying that our deficit would be $23 million. But again, it will change on a monthly basis as we start to report our actual overtime. But today, with the projection, we're at $23 million. If we maintain the 1.7, but we are coming below at 1.5 biweekly overtime.
Thank you. Does that conclude the presentation?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mr. President?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While we talk about overtime, how much of the overtime is given to patrol, and how much overtime is given to other areas of the police budget? Because we want the, if it's going to be overtime, we want it in patrol. But we still want you to come under, you know, what you've been doing the last, 10, 15 years. Need to close that budget deficit with the overtime.
I can forward electronically the biweekly monthly report in which that we show the breakdown of each individual overtime by unit.
Okay.
That's something I
we
can
would like
forward.
to see that if you can send that to the budget committee, because I'm concerned that most of the overtime is not by the police that's patrolling our streets.
Yes, sir.
Mr. President, did you say that's something you can do right now?
Can I get it right now? Yes, sir, I can get it right now. I can just take a break and walk out.
I misunderstood you. I thought you said you couldn't get it.
I can get it at this minute, if
Okay.
you just allow me to step out and bring it
Absolutely.
back.
Let's go through the questions, and then when we get to council, to the second
I'm not
portion
finished.
of the hearing.
I'm not finished.
You want it now?
Yeah, I'm not finished. I was going to ask them, according to what we see here on the overtime deficit budget, y'all like almost 3.2 over budget. Am I reading this right?
I'm sorry.
Down here where it's the overtime deficit, $23,279,000.
Yes, sir.
$84.10.
That's,
Go ahead.
the spreadsheet is a projection throughout the whole fiscal year. And what we had stated is that we anticipated, because of where we are as far as the members that we have, that if we stayed at 1.7 million biweekly, it's a projection, that we would come in today at 23 million deficit. If we stay on the trend that we are now, we're coming in at 1.5. So we are making necessary steps to control the overtime and other things that will help us to bring the overtime down again, is if we are able to get those patrol numbers up. But this is a projection all the way out to June 2019.
I'm hoping this projection is lower than that.
Sir,
I'm hoping the projection is lower than what
I'm
we're
hoping
seeing
so
here.
too, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The
Excuse me. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
All right, sir. This is Chief Stephen Odell. I was going to answer President Young's question about the patrol. It represents approximately 55 to 60% overtime spending, and it's budgeted, or they're spending currently around $850,000 to $950,000 per pay period, which is the bulk of the department's overtime. And she'll still supply the actual document, but that's the number.
Councilwoman Middleton has a follow-up on Council President Young's
I
question.
guess just to piggyback on Council President's question, can you get, I guess, information on officers that, say an officer is hypothetically assigned to the Northern District, and then you need help in the evening in the Southwest District. Do you have numbers of who, you would move from one district to another for overtime? And I say that because there seems to be a problem when officers move in another area for overtime, that they don't do a good job because they're not staying, they're going to another district. So if, I see people we see officers sitting in areas for overtime in another area, and then they're, they're watching the loitering, they're watching drug transactions, they're just sitting in their cars collecting the overtime. So I think we need numbers and how that's affected with that movement, if you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think Councilman Scott said that that's something that he's planning to address specifically in the second portion. Is it okay with you if we skip over that but come back to it? Okay, thank you. So these numbers, going back to the numbers you provided, the academy recruits, 42, 38, 29, and 38. We had asked for the number of recruits that the class started with. Can we go to that? So we had asked for, Bob, when we met with you, when Councilman Pinkett and I met with you, we asked for the number of recruits to start the class and where we were at, thinking that a class that started 8 months ago, some of the academy recruits, hopefully minimally or none, would have dropped off.
I'm looking right now to see if I have a different document with the actual start number.
Okay.
It's going to be pretty close to these, but I'm going to verify
We
it.
can come back, but moving forward on a monthly basis, we'd like to see the number that we started with, as well as the number where we're currently at. And we also asked for upcoming recruitment class or upcoming academy classes. Do we know when the next academy class starts?
It's
Oh, that's on here? Those are all, the last class that started was July 13th of 2018.
Yes, sir.
We asked for all future set academy classes.
That was all I'll get that information to you.
Okay, can we get that tonight? 'Cause
Absolutely.
We provided, we sat down with the budget director and asked for this information in advance. Flash flood warning. That makes sense. That's why everyone's phone in the room is beeping, even though we all have them on vibrate.
Yes, sir.
The current class starts November 29th. The next one, class 1804.
Okay. And we don't have anything after that, or that's probably too far out to.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
But we'll get you additional data as this
Sure.
comes out.
So it seems these start up every 2 or 3 months, plus or minus. Okay. So moving forward, can we please have on the spreadsheet the date of the next class? Do we know how many recruits we have for that next class?
Mr. Chairman, we have 26 people lined up for the next class, which begins in November. The goal is to get up to 50. I
Great.
just spoke with Major Hans, who's in charge of all of that. He indicated that it's still a lot of time, and he is pretty optimistic that we'll get there. So
He's confident we're going to get there?
I share that optimism as well.
Thank you. Okay, and last question on this is, when looking at the projected totals, I noticed in November of 18, as well as May of 19, we have a pretty significant jump that's about a 50% jump in both the salary and the benefits for the vacancy personnel savings. Is there a reason for that? Is that a
Biweekly.
microphone, please?
Sir, there are 3 biweekly pay periods.
Oh, okay, so
Yes, sir.
we're going, okay, that's helpful. And these academy expenses, the costs for these personnel, the 42, the 38, 29, 38, are those folks don't get paid overtime, do they, in the academy?
In the academy, no, sir.
Okay, but there has to be an assumption that when these 42 folks graduate on October 26th, that there's going to be a bump, or actually a decrease in the amount of overtime, right?
Yeah, that's the anticipation, yes.
But the problem is your chart doesn't reflect that.
Yes, sir, because it's a projection and I have not placed that information in because I'm not sure of exactly where they will go. But if they will go into a particular division, then yes, I can plot that out for you and have it ready for you as soon as possible.
Okay, so at the next hearing, we'd like to see how we think that projected overtime is going to be impacted by bringing 42 on in October, 38 on in January, et cetera.
Yes, sir.
That's not a, do you feel that's a financial model that you can project out?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I'm sure that, Bob, your team can assist if police needs any support in that. We want to get accurate projections here. Okay, Councilman Pinkett?
And may I add to that?
Please.
And what will be part of that projection will be the attrition, because as you've got 42 coming in October, we lose whatever our projected loss is, and right now it's looking around 18 to 20 a month. So by then will have lost 40 and then gained 40. So a lot of times that's probably going to be close to a cancel out. Hopefully, as recruiting improves, it's better, but that projection will likely will be around zero.
So the last thing, and thank you, Steve, in response to that, Jim, can you, and Bob and everyone, can you make sure that we have on this spreadsheet, let's project out attrition throughout the whole year, and let's also have a sum of the total number of officers, maybe at the top, total number of civilian, total number of sworn, just so we have a better global picture of what the department has at its disposal. Thank you. Councilman Pinkett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How many officers were hired this past year? If we include the 42 that we anticipate graduating in October.
One more, say that, sorry.
How many officers were hired this year if we add the 42 that we anticipate graduating in October?
That's something I'm going to have to look up. I'll hopefully have it in a few minutes.
Councilman, you mean the past couple of previous classes?
Right. I
Altogether.
kind of want to see how we're doing as it relates to separations from the department compared to how many officers are graduating.
Hiring versus attrition right now is at about minus 35.
Minus 35.
For the year to date.
Okay.
As of last Thursday.
Okay. And
Councilman Costello,
okay, go ahead.
I happen to have a report reflecting that information. So it's attrition so far in 2018 is 145 officers.
Say your name since we.
Drew Vetter, Director of Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. 145 officers lost to attrition in 2018 compared to 116 hired, and that's through August 9th.
116.
But this is information that is tracked by the police department, of course, and could be provided in the tracking spreadsheet going forward.
So do our projections take into consideration the attrition that's happening?
No, they don't.
I'm done.
Councilman Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to pick up on that for a second, Mr. Vetter. So you said it's 145 lost versus 116 hired, correct?
In 2018 through
Yep.
August 9th, that's correct.
Yep. And we're not projected, our projections don't include whether go with attrition. So am I not the only person who thinks that's crazy? that we should be considering that when we're going through attrition?
Can I clarify that? I think
Please, somebody clarify it for me.
the model assumes you're going to have the same number of vacancies through the whole year, which means that you're hiring as many that attrit. And what we're trying to show is kind of month by month what's actually happening. It sounds like from the data we've lost a few more, if I'm getting your numbers right, lost a few more than we've hired over the course of calendar 18. But the model just assumes, for simplicity at this point, let's assume that we hire as many as we bring in and see where that leaves us.
Hold on.
For lack of simplicity, though, you're adding 40 officers, with all due respect, in October. You're not adding more officers until January, but you're averaging whatever it is, 22 officers per month in attrition. We can handle a complex model. We just need it produced for us so that we can digest it.
And to go even further, Mr. Sinema, this is the problem. This council has been asking about attrition. Actually, Mr. Gillis actually has them send me something every month about attrition just so I don't have to ask them at a hearing about attrition. And we keep hearing like, oh, we're doing better with hiring. We are hiring more people than are leaving. And you've heard myself and the president and some other folks say time and time again, we shouldn't act like we're winning this attrition battle because we're hiring at that time 4 more people than left. And we keep saying it over and over and over again. And then you guys go radio silent on attrition. And now we know why. Right? So tell the truth all the time. Not when we can handle bad news too, not just when it's good news. And that leads me into my second question. Is actually for you, Mr. Sinema. So the vacancy personnel savings, sworn and civilian, that's what you and I like to call salary save positions, correct?
No. The number here is if those positions are vacant for the full year, it would produce that amount of savings in the budget,
right,
which
to go
offsets,
towards
of
overtime.
course, the overtime deficit.
So for all intents and purposes, we will be doing that again this year. So have you, as of yet, salary saved any positions for their budget?
No.
No. Do you expect to do so?
No.
No. So you think that you're going to fill all of those vacant positions?
No.
So what's going to happen with those? They're going to go towards overtime, right?
So there'll be per this projection there'll be an overtime deficit because the spending will be above the overtime deficit. But then there will be savings because there's always positions in police that are not filled. So what we're trying to show here is, I mean, this is the way we do our projection. Is we say how many positions are vacant at any given time. Again, we try to, you have to try to model it out over the course of the year. With the timing of the classes, sometimes there's a lump of positions that come in all at once, and then there's less that come in. So we're trying to smooth that out over the year. But generally, we're saying if we spend the same amount in overtime per pay period, take that out, and the number of vacancies stays consistent throughout the year, that's what the total net savings would be.
So those 100 positions that they were given during this year's budget, the extra positions, that money is also going to go to balance overtime too?
Well, yeah, the savings that come from those positions will be used to offset other overages in the budget. That's right.
Okay. I'm just going to say this, and this is the last time I'm ever going to say this. We have to start to say what things actually are, right? If the money is going to be in the budget for overtime, it should be in the budget for overtime. If the money is going to be for positions, it should be for positions. We shouldn't be adding positions to an agency that has hundreds of vacancies that they can't fill because more people are leaving than they are hiring, to say we're going to beef up patrol, which is a lie to the public of Baltimore and the citizens of Baltimore, saying for you guys to ever put in any budget document this past summer that says we're going to beef up patrol with 100 more officers so that we can make people safe, knowing when you printed it on the paper that you were not going to hire those people this year and that money was going to go to overtime. We cannot continue to do that. That is misleading to the public, it's misleading to my colleagues, and quite frankly, it's just simply a lie.
Well, can I clarify that? We budgeted for positions because the intent is to have full-time officers do the work. We acknowledge that there's always going to be vacancies in this agency, just like a lot of large agencies, there's always going to be vacant positions. We didn't want to budget for overtime and give the assumption that overtime is okay. The idea is that you want to fill those positions and have the overtime spending come down over time. Yes, we know that we're not going to be able to fill all those positions, but the intent is to eventually have sworn positions in those,
I'm with you,
sworn
Mr.
personnel
Sinema.
in those positions.
I hear you, but this is the thing. If you guys think if you get halfway through the year and you can hire people, do what you do with overtime. Come back and ask for a supplemental so we can hire more people. Don't just bake it in the budget, and then when you can't use it to hire people, put it into the overtime budget when we knew that it was going to go to overtime when I said all summer during the budget process, you know you're not going to hire these people because we can't fill the vacancies that we have today. We have to stop misleading people. And I'm going to yield to the council president before I ask my next question.
Thank you, Councilman. I'm in agreement with what the councilman is saying as it relates to the vacant positions. I believe we can fill 100 positions, and we need to try our best to fill them. I can understand if we have 10 or 15 vacancies per year as people leave, but 100 vacancies? I mean, the police department, if they really wanted to, could ramp up their hiring process, work with HR so we can get those people through a lot quicker, and then we can reduce all this overtime. We won't be seeing the overtime if we have officers that we have right in those positions, and that we can do something about this schedule that's handicapping the police department. You know, I mean, when Commissioner Batts came up with that with the previous administration, I called foul. I said it's not going to work. And they swore we're going to have more officers on the street. And we have less officers on the street. People don't feel safe. I know the police don't feel safe because it's not enough of them to even do what they need to do. So you got officers who are really afraid to walk by themselves, you know, because they're short. But we need to do a real aggressive hiring process. We got good candidates out there. You know, colleges have, you know, people want to be police officers, but we make it so hard for them to be officers, you know? So I'm just telling you, as the police department, you need to start hiring those 100 vacant positions, because I believe we can get them.
Councilman Scott.
Thank you. And Mr. President, it's 220 vacancies. Oh, the extra. Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, if I'm correct, didn't you guys request to see a breakdown of like overtime by each district?
We did. We asked for, we asked for overtime by each patrol district.
Do we have that, you guys, Mr. Sinema, or can we see that, the overtime by each district, please?
And unit, Councilman. So
Yeah, we
Marine
have
unit,
it. It
AV.
looks like it just didn't make it over.
It didn't make it over. I actually have my assistant trying to put it on a flash drive, but that will be the bi-weekly overtime report. She's trying to place it on the flash drive.
So do we?
She's just trying to put it on the flash
So-
drive.
The bi-weekly report that someone said didn't exist a few weeks ago?
So that data is produced, correct?
Bi-weekly overtime report. I would like for you to see it, so therefore, if it needs to have some changes, or if you need more information, so that I can be better prepared for next month's meeting, I really would like for you to review it.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think right here is a perfect forum for
Yes, sir.
for that review. So how quickly can we get that data?
My admin is actually outside trying to put it on a
Okay.
flash drive.
Excellent. Thank you,
I will
Councilman.
yield until then.
Thank you. Councilman Henry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening.
Good evening.
A couple questions. I think they're all quick. In previous conversations I've had with the police department, there's been an assertion that some of the people who aren't available to be on patrol are assigned to military duty. Where do they show up on this list?
I believe we only have 10 or so military personnel.
Oh, only 10 total in the whole force?
Yes.
All sworn officers?
Yes, a lot of our persons are just on medical. I'm
Just to
sorry.
clarify, I think that it means 10 people would be serving at a time.
Yes.
10 people are
More
serving.
people exist who are in the military, who are police officers.
But no more than 10 are off serving at one time.
Yes, currently.
Okay, and when they do that, they do have their own category. They're not lumped in here somewhere.
No,
Hang on
they
one
do
sec.
have their own.
Councilman Henry, can I add, because you're at the heart of another issue that we have here. So when Councilman Pinkett and I met with you, Bob, we requested, exactly to Councilman Henry's point, we requested the number of officers that are on medical and cannot serve. We requested number of light duty. We requested military. We requested maternity and paternity leave. We requested suspended. We requested all of those things, which are in the email that you were kind enough to summarize for us and send over to BPD. So while medical line of duty and medical non-line of duty, as well as light, for both of those is useful.
I actually have more questions along.
Please go ahead.
But thank you for anticipating them.
We did ask for this.
Okay, so that was the first one. The second was you have these categories marked retirements, resignations, and terminations that add up to a subtitle of 22 separations. And I'm curious how that works with both A, if they've already retired, resigned, or terminated, or been terminated, why wouldn't they be in the list of sworn vacancies at the top? And second, how does that number 22 total fit with the chief's assertion that you have 20 people leaving every month? So you've got 20 separations monthly on average. How do separations fit into total vacancies?
So, I mean, the first thing that would have to be pointed out, it's a snapshot, right? So it's always going to be a snapshot in time. The 22...
Okay, so this total column is a snapshot. That's just like at one instant, this is all the people who right now are, all the positions that are vacant, all the people that are in the process of retiring or have just retired?
In this case, for July, it's retired. So that 22 is included in the vacancy number for July. So these are the end of July numbers. So 299 would include, broken out, 22 people who left.
Okay.
And that next month, if
I think the confusion was there's a total column next to your actual column, and see and the numbers are the same.
That's only because this is day one, or this is
you.
month one.
Okay,
That's it.
all right. Okay, well then, then the next question would be, you've got one group of 408 line of duty, non-line of duty people who are not coming back. Those are real vacancies, meaning those people are not coming back.
Well, they're not vacancies. They're called transitional vacancies, meaning they're not performing the functions fully of the classification they're in, but they are still bodies in position numbers in the department.
So they are doing some kind of work?
Yes.
Okay, as are the people who are medical line of duty and non-line of duty doing any work? Or are those people who are literally out on medical?
They're out on medical.
Okay. They're out.
Still occupying positions.
Light duty people can be doing something.
Correct.
They just can't be out running around.
Correct.
So if you've got 118 people on light duty, why aren't they filling the 79 civilian vacancies?
No, we don't do that. The union would not like to hear that kind of language. You can't fill the civilian positions with sworn personnel. Those civilian vacancies are completely separate. The individuals that are in light duty and or 408 positions will be doing work, and it may resemble, civilian work, but they cannot take the jobs or duties of.
Well, not permanently, but until they're off light duty. I mean, I'm not suggesting that these people be permanently transferred and that position be eliminated as a civilian position.
Absolutely
I'm just
right.
saying, if you've got positions that don't need sworn active officers, how many of them could use light duty officers? Has anyone looked at that?
Yeah, all these personnel are being used throughout the department to perform a number of job duties that are gaps that exist. And there's far more gaps existing than there are even 408 or light duty personnel to fill them.
Okay, last question. You've got under the academy section here numbers of total cadets that you're expecting to graduate with each of these classes, and the numbers are different from class to class. Is that because the number of people in each class are different, or have you found that there is a algorithm where some classes produce more actual graduates than others?
No, they recruit to the fullest extent possible for any and all classes. Like you heard earlier from Chief Gillis, the goal for this next one is 50. It may end up being 40. It may end up being 54. And that's what these numbers are reflective of. Whatever the circumstances were at the time, that when they closed that particular recruitment set for that academy class, there was a number. What was asked earlier, which we need to get, was what was the actual starting number, because I don't believe these are going to be reflective of the starting number. They'll be pretty close, but they won't be exact, so that has to be ascertained. But
because that set of numbers there, that's what you're projecting will graduate, not what you're projecting will start the class, because not everybody
correct.
finishes.
These are the ones currently in process to make it through.
Okay, in that case, I'll just circle back to my colleague from the second district's, I think the point that he made pretty clearly, which is, or actually maybe to reference Council President, I have no doubt, I believe you, that you can hire 147 new officers over the next year. These look like reasonable numbers for academy classes. However, since, according to Mr. Vetter, you've lost 145 officers by August of this year. If you're hiring 140, 150 a year, and you're losing 240 a year, I don't understand why we haven't eliminated some of these sworn positions and used the salary savings for any of a number of things that the city needs, possibly including the overtime you're trying to take from other sources of revenue.
So one thing, relative to the class stuff too, as you see this will project out, as those numbers change, those numbers will change if there are dropouts too. I just want to make that clear from one of the first points. So next month, that class may say 41, and that would mean one person left.
Has there been a point in the last 3 or 4 years where we have hired even 100 more officers than we've lost?
No.
In the last 4 years? Then why would we think we're going to do that this year? Why wouldn't we just close out those positions, and if you get to the point where you're getting ahead of the game, you come back and ask for more money then?
Are we allowed to apply?
Huh? I'm sorry, was that too many questions?
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm not on the Public Safety Committee, so I don't hear this as often as Councilman Scott does. So maybe I'm a little slower to realize this.
No.
Councilman Henry, I can try to answer that question. So in fiscal 18, the police department had to ask for about a $21 million supplemental appropriation, right? So going into 19, we knew that structurally they were.
But that 21 million was supposed to be coming from extra recordation and transfer tax money.
It was.
But there's 220 sworn. There's 299 total vacancies.
Yeah, maybe.
In the police department.
I'm talking about fiscal 18.
Oh, I'm sorry. Pray continue.
In fiscal 18, there were not, because we added 100 positions in the budget in fiscal 19. So in fiscal 18, there was much less salary savings being generated. There was not enough to offset the overtime deficit. That's why we had to ask for the supplemental. In the 19 budget, what we said was, we're adding positions into the budget. We're making an adjustment to the police department budget, and then they're going to need to bring their overtime down to a degree so that we could stay within budget. So you're using fiscal 19 numbers to look at fiscal 18, and fiscal 18 was a totally different situation because there wasn't those 100 positions.
Councilman Henry, if I could add for context, if you scroll to pages approximately 7 through 9, they're not numbered, of the larger packet that Margaret prepared. You'll see historical overtime going back to 2000. I'm going to jump over to Councilwoman Clark if you want to take a look at that, and then we'll come back to you. Councilwoman Clark.
I'd like to go back to overtime just from the way I care about it, if I can. So you said that 50% of the overtime budget, forget what it is for a minute, at a given time is for sworn personnel or for uniformed patrol. Well, you didn't say, but what is it?
I would say actually, Chief O'Dell, it's primarily all the overtime is for sworn members.
Okay, so in that case, something was 50%. I think it was uniformed.
Yes, I think it was stated that patrol was at least 50%.
Yeah, right now the spending for the last pay period, patrol represented approximately 50 to 60% of the total expenditure. President Young had
overtime budget
of the total spend for the last pay period. President Young had asked that, you know, the majority of that goes to patrol. So I had just looked up the number, and that's what it represented.
About 55?
What's that?
55 to 60%?
Of the total spend for the last pay period was patrol.
Can I get one thing clear right now? Sorry, I'm not on this committee. I'm just dropping by. You're the director of the budget for the police department?
I am.
And Chief O'Dell, you are, what's your role?
Chief of Science and Management Services Division.
Of the what?
Science and Management Services Division. Science.
Cool. All right. The science of overtime.
Yes.
Let's talk about it for 1 second. Thank you, both. So, Director Williams, when you look at giving the overtime money out, let's just talk about well, one thing, where's the other 40% overtime going to? Sworn but not uniform?
Primarily, all of the overtime is going to sworn officers. It's just that 55 to 60% is in the area of patrol.
Where we live.
Yes, ma'am.
The second highest is CID, Criminal Investigative Division. Then the next highest.
Detectives.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Thank you. So, when the money is going out to the 9 police districts, how is that figured? What is a unit of overtime? Is it the average cost of one shift? Or how do you calculate, and how is it distributed? By what principles of, I presume, well, I'm not going to presume anything. How do you calculate it and get it out there in timely fashion, or how does that work?
The way that the police, I'm just hoping that I understand your question.
No, I'm just saying,
as far as when
do you decide, how do you figure out how much it's going to cost so you know what a budget should be? So if I say one shift is worth, with one officer on one shift for overtime figures out to be a number, okay? And then you sort of figure it out based on that number, I would presume. Because what I'm looking at from where I sit and stand is how many uniformed police are on the streets in the districts I'm honored to represent. So I think about, well, what does that cost for that overtime? We're talking overtime, so I'm on that subject. So how do you figure it out? Who decides?
Overtime is going to vary, and it varies because when the shift cannot be filled, and so there is then an overtime, I guess, request that has gone out because there is a certain number of officers that must go out per shift, per district, for the safety of the officers as well as the safety of the community. And that number can only be determined once we make the evaluation that a shift is short and overtime members have to go out. So again, when we did the projection, it was based on historical information. And so that's why you see an actual and then you see a projection, because we really don't know what those numbers are going to be until that day happens.
And I understand that very clearly, but somehow you have to budget it, and you have to figure what a unit of overtime costs you, so that you're not going to send a check out to Northeast District Police in time to hand it to an officer. You're just going to have it in a budget that you know you can pay out. And so at the beginning of the year, you figure it out. And how many units of overtime are budgeted? What does it cost? What is the cost of a unit?
So a unit of overtime is 1.5 times an individual's pay. So the amount of money will vary depending on the individual and where they fall on the salary scale. You can roughly assume that every hour of overtime is costing us around $45 an hour, all totaled. $45 to $50 an hour is a good estimate. So if I see 30,000 hours of overtime in a pay period, I expect a number of around 1.5 million spend, maybe 1.55, maybe 1.6, which would roughly run out to that $50 an hour of overtime. So to get those projections, generally, you'd have to be able to chart out expected overtime use, which is done daily by the different districts based on call-ins and expected shortages, and that's how they manage their particular spend. And they've actually been excellent at it. They've brought their spend down quite a bit in respect to managing. Same with CID.
So
that's why we're running a 20% improvement.
Well,
hang on, Councilwoman, just because I know everyone's looking around the room. So
excuse me, I can't hear you.
I was just saying the leak has been identified, so people can stop looking around the room, because I think we were all distracted.
About what?
The leak of water.
No. Oh, I'm so sorry.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, Councilwoman.
That we're
Please
leaking in the
continue.
middle of such an important conversation. So then that goes back to what I think we've already the committee has requested, and that is, what is the standard requirement of hours of officers per shift per district, so that when that is not going to be attained, the overtime money will go in there to make that happen, presuming someone can be found to fill it. But do you see what I mean? So what I would like to see then, and you may have already produced it several times to the committee I don't belong to.
So I think every district has a different shift strength.
Well, and that's what I think I would like to see, certainly for the three that I am honored to represent.
Please use the mic.
So each district has a different shift.
You got to use the mic, Colonel. Yep, and say your name, please.
So each district, I'm sorry, my name is Byron Conaway. I'm Colonel, Chief of CID. Each district has a different shift strength. Northeast may be 21, Northern may be 18 or 19. Just like they said that each officer, so for instance, CID has an 18-year average for overtime. So I can expect that I'm on the higher side of $52 an hour, because on CID side, I have an average of 18 years with my detectives. So when I pay out to districts or I pay out to overtime, I know that I am anticipating paying an 18-year salary for overtime. So for instance, CID, for this pay period total, for district police service, I spent $34,000 in $34,000 total just in this pay period to pay overtime outside of what I typically run.
You're Lieutenant Colonel Conway.
I'm Colonel Conway, yes, ma'am.
I don't know which is the higher, but
That's
they
all
all sound good to me.
Yep.
So what are you talking about? What do you run that you're
So
using this
it's
example?
different. It's two different divisions. So when you have a patrol strength,
Yeah, that's what I'm interested in.
right? So you have a
we don't have
different.
detectives anymore in the districts.
Yes. Well.
Let's not talk about that.
Okay.
Let's just say we don't.
Okay. All right. So let's stick with patrol.
Yes.
So you have a different shift strength, right, per district, and
how does that determine, sir?
So when you have a shortage, a manpower shortage, if you will, you'll have
Bad word.
right?
A shortage.
A shortage.
Personnel.
Right, of personnel. Then you'll have overtime that will supplement patrol to bring that district up to staffing levels.
Oh, that's what I thought, yes. And so, what we need then, yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm almost done. What we need then is, we need to see the numbers that are assigned as the ideal staffing pattern for all shifts, for all districts, and certainly the principle of staffing numbers and how they are arrived at. Thanks.
So I can answer that if you'd like me to. My name is Darren Gitt.
One second, Colonel. Councilwoman, just to add on, and just not a informational point, but a reminder for you that even those numbers, as the police department has attested to for the last 3 years in their work with us to bring redistricting to the city police department, we have to go into that knowing that even those numbers in some cases are not going to be accurate for what the citizens actually need in those districts, as they do not include the many things that we and actually the police commissioner also
And Councilman, I couldn't agree with you more, which is the point of it. When I would like my constituents to see the discrepancies, frankly, and be able to have somebody rationalize those to them. So I'm not against anybody, I'm for it. I'm for fill in the ranks on every shift. And I just have to better understand, as a non-member of this committee, the Budget Committee, how you come to, Ms. Williams, what you budget, how it gets to you.
Yes, ma'am.
And all these gentlemen seem to be happy to help us begin to figure out how those numbers arrive as they do. And the committee will get, or I'll get it, or it can go to the chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
We will get you what you want.
Thank you, Councilwoman Sneed.
So, two questions, I'll make it quick. When we talk about the academy and graduating, I'm just curious, do we try to set a goal of how many people should be in the class? And let's say 38 people are in this class. Are we essentially shooting for like a number of 52 or something, and then when we don't hit the 52, is the number that we pay for the academy class is still the same? So I guess is the number still the same? Are we paying one set fee, or is it based on every individual who enters the class?
Say that last part again.
So are we paying by a whole group of folks, or just each individual folk who enters the academy?
You only pay for what you see. So in that case, the 38 or the 42, they're the ones you're paying for. The goal is always as high as possible. Jim had mentioned, Chief Gillis mentioned 50 for the next one, we hope. But if we get 40, then 40 is what positions that will be taken, 40 is what will cost the budget, and so on and so forth.
And so we don't set it, do we set aside, hey, since it's actual how many folks enter the class, if we're shooting for, 50 each class, is that number set aside for each?
It is, because we have the vacancies. So with the vacancies that are showing, we would be able to do that. If we didn't have that, we would have a different problem. So you don't have to set anything aside. The vacancies are there.
Okay. And my next question then is for the overtime in reference to when districts are short. So when you're saying, hey, Shannon Sneed is essentially, she's making, I don't know, the $75 an hour, it's short over in the Eastern District, anybody can go over there. Like, you can literally take someone from another district and put
Correct.
them over. But all districts are short, though.
Correct.
Yes.
But we still pull them. So Eastern District could be pulled at any given time, officers there to go somewhere else.
So my name is Darren Garrity. I'm the chief of patrol. So any officer from any district is allowed to work volunteer overtime. So that means that if that district fulfilled their amount of officers to work that shift, they can then go, if they're on H days, on a personal day, then apply for overtime in any district throughout the city. We will not take officers from the Eastern District and move them to another district to fulfill anybody else's overtime. So that's why we went into the mandatory. So when we put the officers back into patrol, the 115 officers, what that did was that reduced the amount of mandatory, the drafting of officers to work a shift, which then made them basically stay over, fulfill that partial tour duty, and then we would then do it again. But no, we do not move any officer from one district to another to satisfy another district's deficiency.
Okay.
Unless that officer is off. Now, if the officer is off, they have all the right, that they want to go work overtime in any district that they feel that they want to work overtime. We don't tell them no. That's part of their contract agreement, so we can't get involved in that.
Thank you, that's it.
Thank you, Councilwoman. One of the other things we asked for was a district breakdown by patrol. Do we have that available?
I don't have it.
Overtime use?
No. Total number of officers in each district for patrol.
Yes, the colonel has it. He'll get it to you right now.
Okay. Is that something we can throw up on the screen? Or this laptop's controlling that screen, right?
Yes.
If you could just read through them. I'm quick. I'll write them down.
Okay, so these numbers are going to sound, a little bit different, but I'm going to tell you exactly how many officers are out on the street in patrol in each district.
So, and you're going to start with Central, and then you're going to go
Yeah, I'm gonna-
Southeast, East.
I'll go Central, Southeast, and that's how we name them District 1 through 9, and this is how it'll go.
Give me 1 second.
Sure.
Northwest, Western, Southwestern, and Southern. So we go Central, Southeast, East, Northeastern, Northern, Northwestern, Western, Southwestern, and Central. Yep,
Yes,
got
sir,
it.
that's correct. Central has 77. Southeast has 75. Eastern has 75. Northeast has 100. The Northern has 76. The Northwest has 73. The Western has 76. The Southwest has 79. And the Southern has 79.
What's that total?
I just popped back off the screen. Hold on a second. That is a total of 710.
710. And we need 1,221 in patrol to adequately staff the current schedule?
For the 4-3 schedule, yes, sir.
All right. And what were we at in, so this is a snapshot. This is what today looks like.
Yes.
All right.
After the 125 added.
And this was after the 125 was added?
Yes. We were at 610. We ran anywhere from 599 to 610 with the officers because on any daily basis, people would go light duty, people would be medical, and then we would update these every 3 to 4 days because we were trying to keep track of it a lot, more.
Sure.
So
Obviously, that's 610 is half of 1221.
Yes, sir.
Just about. So we've been operating at half strength in patrol. Obviously, no wonder why the overtime cost is so significant. My understanding is that we have civilian positions in both retirement processing or separation processing, as well as evidence control that are currently staffed by sworn officers. Is that correct?
Yeah, there are some sworn in each and in other places as well.
Why are those sworn officers not in patrol?
We do not have the civilian positions for those particular areas
Councilman
to
Scott.
replace them.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I want to come back to this after.
Chief, I think that I know this committee and the entire council was told over a year ago that the department was identifying civilian positions that were occupied by sworn officers and that they would be removed and sent back to patrol. And they said 100 positions, actually, is what they told us. They identified 100 positions in the police department that were being occupied by able-bodied officer who could be working patrol, right? So what I'm hearing from you now is that that hasn't been done. And question, has it been done first?
No.
No. So it hasn't been done.
Councilman, hang on one second. You have printouts for us?
I do.
If you could, yep, Richard will grab them from you just to hand them out to the council members. I'm sorry, Councilman.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. The second thing, if it hasn't been done, then why not? And most importantly, when is it going to be done? We know over and over again, we're told that we're going to put civilians in civilian jobs and cops in cops jobs. Actually, just walking downtown today, I talked to a veteran officer who said, if we had more veteran officers on the street and not working these desk jobs, then we can get our job done, right? So if the rank and file can acknowledge that that needs to happen in order to, one, protect the citizens, but two, also prevent us from spending more money in overtime, why can't we seem to get that from Fayette Street? When is that going to happen? When you come to us a year ago and say that we're going to start with these 100 positions and then move forward, and then a year later you haven't even did the 100 that you have, and you know that patrol is going out short on every shift, when is it going to happen?
I do not have an answer as to when it will happen. What I do know is that there was an identified late last year just over 200 positions. Phase 1 was 105 is what the first phase was going to be. It's something that we have been we've started working on with BBMR because we have to identify the funding for those positions.
Well, let me identify it for you right here. There's some sworn vacancies that we know that we're not going to fill. We can just transfer the money over like we would do for overtime. Problem solved. Mr. Sinema, do you have an update on that? Have you heard from the police department about those civilian positions?
No, I haven't.
So let's go. Okay. How many of these civilian positions are filled with sworn personnel staff?
So no positions are filled. Well, in the context that you're asking, there's just over 200 that were identified late last year, mid-fall last year, and phase 1 was the 105, and that included all of Management Services Division. So it would include fiscal, HR, evidence control, and some other smattering of other units and sections.
Just for clarification, and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong. God bless you. The 200 positions, those are jobs at BPD that are currently being performed by sworn personnel, right?
Yeah, functions being performed.
Yeah. And of those 200, you said 105 are in phase 1. Are those the ones that were just moved over?
No, the phase 1 was just identified as being, at the time, I'm going to use the word easier group to start with, based on the functions and the ability to actually make the hiring happen.
Got it. How many of those 200 positions are posted on BPD's website right now or on the city's HR website?
None, because they do not exist. The vacancies do not exist for those 200. There's the funding, the classifications have to be created so that the funding is available, then you fill them.
Got it. So we've got all these new vacancies that were created this year in the budget. We can agree to disagree without being disagreeable about whether or not they're filled. We have vacancies to move those sworn officers over to, and then that would create vacancies where those job functions are currently being performed. Is that correct?
That's right. You have sworn vacant positions. If a sworn person is doing a civilian job, you hire a civilian, you move the sworn person back into the vacancies. We don't need new positions to do the civilianization, in my opinion. We can do it.
Okay.
We can do it.
So why? So we have a solution.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first time that the solution has been discussed with BPD, or has this been discussed in the past with BPD? Bob?
It's been discussed. I think the disagreement is that they wanted to add positions. I don't agree with that. There are plenty of slots to bring in civilian to do civilian work, and then you move the sworn person back into one of those vacant slots. Now, how many of those? I mean, to be fair, some of the sworn people doing civilian work, they might have some level of expertise that wouldn't be simple to replace in the short term. So it's a matter of doing it in a
Sure.
in a-
I get
in a
we can't do
normal-
the 200 overnight.
Right. Yeah.
But
there has to be a schedule.
we could be making progress on it, and it sounds like we haven't made any progress. Steve, would you agree with Bob's assessment of the sworn positions that are vacant, where we could swap some of those sworn officers who are performing civilian functionality, put them in the sworn position, performing sworn functionality, i.e. being on the street and patrol, upping our number from 710 to somewhere closer to 1221, while you have civilian vacancies that could be filled with civilians that are hired. Does that make sense?
It does, and we are talking.
I need a time frame. That's not, with all due respect, Steve, and I like you a lot and I have a great deal of respect for you, that's not an acceptable response. What does that mean? I need more clarification as to, we're talking, when are we going to see progress? Because we haven't seen progress for an extended period of time, and we feel like on the council that we've spent a lot of time talking about it. So we want to know when results will be delivered.
I'm going to get them a plan by the end of August.
By the end of August, okay. Councilman Pinkett.
So Mr. Senator, have we ever done any projections on the cost savings related to putting civilians in those positions where sworn officers are?
No. The way we look at it is, the way we've looked at it, and we've asked over time for a plan from BPD about how that would work. I mean, we look at it as it should be cost neutral. Like I said, you could bring in a civilian to do the work. You can move the sworn back. Now, in some cases, you might have.
If I can just interject, and maybe I'm wrong. I was making an assumption that a sworn officer in that position might be getting paid more than a civilian. But then that sworn officer also being in that position taxes the overtime.
Exactly.
Because,
right.
And so I just don't see the motivation. And I'm just saying that maybe we need to monetize, these savings that we could experience if we put these measures in place. And the fact that, and I think that's part of the reason for this reason for this hearing, is historically we've just allotted the overtime expense without any motivation to really address the issue. And so there needs to be some motivation to put these things into implement immediately, because there are things that aren't happening in the city that could be happening if we had these resources available.
No, I agree with you. I agree. I mean, the trick is trying to figure out what the skill level, what the salary of the person you have to try, and it's always not always a one-for-one swap, but it's developing a plan. Like, how many people are in those positions right now? How many civilians, or how many sworn are in civilian? How many of them can legitimately move back? And then what would you have to hire on the civilian side? In some cases, you might have to hire somebody at a higher level with a different skill level to do the work, but trying to put that map together, that plan. And that has been discussed. We've asked for that. It's something we've pushed for, but again, I don't know what the status of that is. We'll have to see that sometime over the next month or so.
Councilman Scott.
Thank you. And Chief Odell, like my colleague said, we know that this issue precedes you and your role and in your current role. We think that you do a great job with the area that you control of the police department. But like for this issue, I think what we're requesting is that we want to see these positions like up on BPD's website within the next month, but then also provide to us a timeline for how we can, as quick as possible, for the next 3 to 6 months, actually get this transition going, starting with these positions, so we can see them going back out into patrols in the other districts.
Thank you, Councilman. Yeah, Jim, I guess we're going to be, the three of us and someone from the Council President's office will be meeting with you and hopefully Bob in the coming week I got you next, Councilman Dorsey, to work through this, and we'd like to see this information starting to get tracked. And Steve, I echo Councilman Scott's sentiments about you, and I finally want to say that I have some level of confidence that this is going to start to get addressed, but we're kind of beyond the point of where it should have been addressed a very long time ago.
Thank you, sir.
Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Garrity, you gave some numbers a minute ago. I was talking to Colonel Worley. Can you reiterate what these numbers actually represent?
So the numbers that I gave out were the actual full-duty officers that are assigned to each patrol district. They are just officers, not sergeants, not lieutenants.
Just officers.
And they are broken down off over 3 shifts. So it's not saying one shift has that amount. That is a total amount of officers assigned to each one of those districts that are full duty.
Thank you. I wanted to, so I've been notably requesting a bunch of information recently, particularly around officers, sergeants, and lieutenants, budgeted in Section 622 of the patrol budget. And I want to say that I had an enlightening, good meeting the end of last week with Chief Odell, Lieutenant Tony Smith, Bob Senemy, Matt Rappaport from BBMR, and Jim Gillis, where we reviewed Section 622 of the budget. And I think to harken back to, the remarks that Councilman Scott made at the beginning of the hearing, it's very, very clear that the budget that we vote on is in no way representative of what's actually going on within the police department. Very, very few of the people who are budgeted out of Service Summer 622, the patrol section of the budget, are actually working what any layman, any average person in Baltimore City would actually think of as patrol. And there are huge numbers of, it would say, that patrol officers who are budgeted out of other sections of the budget as well. And I think that nobody in that meeting disagreed that it's not an accurate representation of what's actually going on. So it's unfair for the city council to vote on a budget that is just so blatantly inaccurate in its representation of how the department is actually being staffed, how the department is actually being managed. But nonetheless, it was a productive or at least enlightening meeting, if not a bit later than I wanted it to be, because it is 5 weeks since I first made the request, and I still don't actually have a copy of it. I was able to review it in that meeting, but not walk away with it. We were reviewing numbers from the month of June for patrol staffing, and based on the shift schedules that I received from the month of June, we had 921 officers across the entire department assigned to work various shifts in the 9 districts and the 3 shifts, 27 shifts in total. My staff reviewed the shift schedules provided to us by each of those districts as per their real staffing via Jim Gillis. In the month of June, there were 921 officers being drawn on to staff shift schedules. And in the month of July, we were told that 115 officers would be added to patrol, right? 115, that was the number that was made public?
Yes.
That's correct.
125. So my staff also reviewed, they spent the whole day today compiling information from the 9 police districts, the 27 shift schedules today, and found for the month of August. So we have a before and after that supposed increase to patrol. In June, we had 921 officers being assigned to patrol shifts, and today we have 885 officers, sergeants, and lieutenants. So we actually have, by my staff's having just spent the last 5 hours going over these manually and comparing June to August, where in the interim we should have seen 125 officers increased on patrol. We actually have a decrease of almost 40 officers. So I'm concerned that even the things that we're being told are not accurate representations, and that's certainly not depictive of what the public has been told about the department changing its patrol. Can somebody speak to that? Because in the last meeting, in the last hearing here, I asked Commissioner Tuggle directly, if you're reassigning 125 people to patrol, how many of them are just opting to leave the department because they don't want to go back to patrol? Or, what else more can you tell us about what's really happening in a more nuanced and detailed fashion? And the response I got was as if I was kind of attacking, and just basically was told this is not a shell game. And what I'm looking at now is that the numbers just don't add up in a way that actually reflects that commitment and that statement that was made. And in the interim, Commissioner Tuggle's not here. He has, failed to respond to basically every communication that I've made to him since then. A series of, I think, 8 emails over the course of the last month went unresponded to. Even when I said, why are you not responding to these emails? And today I called him and his voicemail wasn't set up, so I can't even figure out how this guy's plan for communication is even set up to work. I can't get any more real than this.
So just a comment on that real
Before
fast.
you respond, just real quick, Councilman Scott, and then if you can respond.
Thank you. And I think, Colonel, and I've been on the record as saying that I'm not appreciative of how the councilman been treated with the responses to him and the timeliness of them. But also, I think in your response, if you could add in to your earlier remarks about how many folks are assigned to each patrol district, also, could you clarify if that includes details within that patrol district? For example, does the central district's numbers include, downtown deployment detail? Does the eastern district include Hopkins deployment detail, et cetera, et cetera? Because I think it's important for folks to know, and also think in context for those here and watching and listening today, they also need to understand the totality of the issues around those districts.
So just when the commissioner said about not a shell game, I believe what the commissioner was responding to is in the past when promises were made to send officers back, they sent back, and this was not any regime that has been in the past 2 regimes, but they sent back officers that were out on light duty, that were on medical, and they basically were just a number. I think what Commissioner Tuggle meant, what he believed was that these are hard officers. These are physical officers. They're not on medical. They're not on light duty. There was no way to anticipate who would be leaving the agency. Of the 125 officers that went back, if I'm not speaking out of turn, I believe 6 actually put their paperwork in. So we actually have 119 officers that actually went into the patrol division.
But you also had 192 leave. You had actually in the month of August compared to the month of June. So there's a good 2-month gap where in the middle this change took place. In the month of August, there are 192 names missing from the schedule that were there in June, and there are 157 names added on there. That's a net deficit of 40 over the last 2 months being assigned to patrol shifts, which is directly related to us not having enough officers to draw on day to day in order to be able to staff the shifts without requiring overtime. We're actually moving in the wrong direction here. We have 40 fewer than we had 2 months ago.
All right, so to attempt to explain it, I'm gonna give it a shot. So the service, when the commissioner says that 115 or 125 are moving, what you might not see is the fact that they're already in the service, but they were not performing patrol functions, which is where we came to showing you that some of those were actually in CID, some are in EMT.
No, because what I'm looking at is directly drawn from the patrol shift schedules. Everything that I'm talking about is names from the monthly shift schedules provided for officers who are working sector shift, district sector shifts. It has nothing to do with where their name appears in budget service 622 or anything else. This is directly from the majors of the districts, from their own shift schedules. I've looked at those names of those officers actually working shifts for patrol.
All right, that I'm not sure about. The difference sounds like it could be the attrition. There's 22 in July, and as a result of Baltimore County transfer class, I believe, there's probably another 20 to 25. Does that sound accurate? That have in August so far that have decided to leave. So that 40 difference, as to why the overlap, I don't know, but the 40 difference might be accounted for that. The numbers.
I'm going to say it again, and I appreciate what you're saying and trying to explain this, but explanations aside, there are 192 fewer officers matched up with only 157 more officers. There's officers, sergeants, and lieutenants again. This is all three of these ranks. The public is being very, very blatantly misled when the department says we're adding 125 new officers to patrol, and what we actually have are 40 fewer. There's just you can't explain that away.
No,
that's 160 difference, right? We're supposed to have 120 more, we have 40 fewer. That's a gap of 160 officers that the public is being misled about. That's not okay, especially when you're saying that's not okay.
I do know that they were not transferred out of patrol. All transfers come through me. There were not 140 or 190 or any number of officers being transferred out of patrol.
They're just not being assigned to patrol shifts.
I don't know where they're at in that respect.
That's what's driving the overtime here.
So, Councilman Scott, to answer your question, so the numbers that I provided were strictly the patrol officers. The other officers that are assigned, like the Inner Harbor Unit and the other areas that you mentioned, are not counted in that number. We do not count any. We count them as a discretionary unit, and I do have those numbers as well.
Can you provide those by each district too?
Yes, I can.
I have a follow-up question here on back to the civilian issue. Am I correct to assume that on average these civilian positions are being paid less than officers that are out on patrol?
All things equal, civilians cost less.
So if civilians cost less, why can't we have those sworn officers that are doing civilian functions in patrol and then pay our civilians overtime to do civilian functionality?
The city doesn't have the bandwidth or the capacity, civilian capacity to do that. There's not enough of them. Majority of the civilians in the department, many of them are in the crime lab, for example. They wouldn't overlap into any of the areas that we're talking about.
Got it. How many total civilians do we have in the department?
I'm going from memory, so just over 400.
400
positions, and I think there's 360 filled. It's very close to that. I can look in just a minute and tell you for sure.
So when we say positions, we're talking about those functions, right?
In this case, position numbers, actual classifications, crime lab technician, office support specialist, 400 of those.
And 360 are filled, so 90% of those are filled.
Mm-hmm.
How many of those that are, so we're saying that over half of those are filled with sworn? Because you told me the number was about 200.
No, that's above and beyond. So there's a set number currently of civilians that work in the department in various job classifications throughout the department, HR generalist, crime lab tech, so forth. Those are existing and they're currently working. The sworn that are performing administrative duties or duties that otherwise could be classified as civilians, those positions are unaccounted for. They don't appear anywhere. They're not filling a job. They're not filling a vacancy. They are in a job that no position exists for. So there isn't a civilian spot for it. But a classification may be applicable to it, it's just there's no position for it.
Councilman Scott, if you could.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. And I think that for my colleague, I think that this is something that is mentioned in the consent decree, but also that we mentioned before about optimizing the department, having
We have a meeting tomorrow.
identifying jobs, all of the jobs that can be occupied by civilians versus officers. I think that what the chief is saying is that we have positions that are filled by officers that are identified as sworn positions that probably should be identified as civilians positions, but they don't show up in his numbers as of right now.
Correct.
We need to bump up the civilian positions numbers, and that's what needs to happen.
So I think I asked the question the wrong way. So thank you, Councilman. So we currently have 360 civilians that work at the department, but we have another 40 vacancies that we know should be filled with civilians, and then we have another 200 positions that we think could be filled by civilians but are currently filled by sworn. Did I summarize that the right way?
Yeah, it sounds right.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Scott?
Thank you. Colonel, yeah, can you go through those numbers really quickly before I ask my next question?
Yes, sir. So we'll start out with the central, and we'll go down the same way we went before.
Which group is this?
This is the discretionary unit. And actually, Colonel, before you do that, I want to do something myself, actually, for the general public to go through the same order, just so that folks know, based off the last census, the population for each of the districts. So Central District is 38,167. Eastern District is 41,100. Southeastern District is 65,274. Sorry, I went out of order there. Northeastern District is 131,607. The Northern District is 95,397. Northwestern District is 79,299. The Western District is 40,908, sorry. And Southwest is 67,298. And the Southern is 61,881.
Okay. So the central district, now these numbers will add in three, so we add three officers for admin. So these numbers include 3 for an admin, which is inside doing admin work. The central district has 47 officers with that and admin assigned. 24 for the southeast, 36 for the eastern, 18 for the northeast, 18 for the northern, 19 for the northwest, 16 for the western, 19 for the southwest, and 32 for the southern. And those numbers are not counted into the patrol function. We do not count them in for riding around a patrol vehicle.
Thank you.
Those include command staff?
No.
Just discretionary?
Just discretionary.
If you want sergeants, I have that, and if you want lieutenants, I have that as well.
Well, you can give us that, yes, sir. Why not?
Sure. So and it's going to be broken down the same way. So we'll start out with sector patrol first.
Yes, sir.
So sector patrol for the central, there are 12 sergeants. I'm sorry, I apologize. There are 10 sergeants assigned to the central district. 13 to the southeast, 12 to the eastern, 10 to the northeast, 12 to the northern, 14 to the northwest, 11 to the western, 10 to the southwest, and 12 to the southern.
And those are in addition, like in the central, you have 10. That's in addition to the 77 in patrol.
Yes, that's add-on. Yes, sir. So that's 10 sergeants for that. And then I have, if you want, the discretionary sergeants as well. We break
Yes,
it down
sir.
the same way.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so for the central, they have 6. The southeast, they have 4. The eastern, they have 9. Northeast has 4. The northern has 7. Northwest has 6. The western has 5. Southwest has 4. And the southern has 8.
What's that mean?
So what that means, Councilwoman, is that, I'm so used to calling you, I probably apologize. What that means is those sergeants that I just read off the second time, they're discretionary. So what they are above like a foot unit and or a DAT team. So they are not in, but they are in a patrol division.
But they have their own
Yes. Yes.
units.
Yes.
So Colonel, thank you. And just to follow up on Councilman Dorsey's point, also, when those officers were sent back to patrol, which was what, like 2 months ago now, roughly, about a month and a half, maybe?
Less than that. So about a month and a half.
Month and a half. Mr. Vedder, you may have it since you had this other information. How many folks did we lose from the department during that time frame? This last month? How many separated?
Councilman, I do have the attrition numbers by month.
22.
So August through August 9th, we had lost 10 officers. 22 were lost to attrition in July, 21 in June.
And Mr. Vedder, I guess this is a homework assignment for you, and this will help my colleague out. If we can identify of those 22 and cross-reference that with patrol to see where they came from in the department so that we can see how many of them actually left from patrol, in addition to, it's my understanding that maybe some of these officers were assigned to patrol but then put out on other detail as well and are not in actual district patrol, if we can track that down as well. Because for the record, the council has learned and we have officially requested the commissioner to return all officers who have been assigned to this secret John Hopkins detail to be sent back to patrol, because if patrol is going out short everywhere else, the Eastern District nor the Northern District can afford to foot John Hopkins with their own private personal police force.
So I don't have the those numbers broken out by how many came from patrol and how many were resignations versus retirements, but I think that's something that the
we
agency
can
will have
follow up.
available.
That's a follow-up. Yeah, I wasn't expecting for you to have that today. And then, ma'am, to go to the, thank you for the information about the per district numbers. We appreciate that. Do you guys have the breakdown for the previous fiscal year? How much was spent per district in overtime?
I can send it to you. I don't have it with me.
Yes, please provide that to us as soon as possible. And so,
Bob, do you think some of these issues that we're experiencing with spending and with how quickly jobs are being posted online, all these different issues that we've been discussing for the last 2 hours, do you think that those are things that could potentially be resolved in a more expeditious fashion if the city had local control over the police department?
That I am not sure. I would have to check with our legal folks about what the difference would be. I'm not familiar with the things that we have to go to the state to ask for permission versus the things we can do locally. So I'd have to check with our legal counsel on that just to be sure, to give you the right info.
Yeah, that would be helpful if we could discuss that at the next hearing.
Mr. Chairman, the civilian number is 507. I said just over 4, it's just over 5.
507.
Budgeted.
And how many of those are vacant? You said
70. That's the one on the sheet. 79 of them are vacant.
I got to follow up.
Okay, so we have 507 civilian positions, of which 79 are vacant, and then we have approximately 200 sworn performing what we believe should or could be civilian functions.
Correct.
Okay. Councilman Scott.
Thank you. And Colonel, can you provide that information that you provided in email form as well so that we can give it to the rest of our colleagues that are not here?
Absolutely, sir.
Thank you so much.
Chief Odell, I'm sorry, Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to follow up to say that subsequent to the last request I was making, in the meeting that I had last week and via email today, made a request for other information. I just want to put that out there today that I've requested a breakdown of the locator code, which is the assignment that is attached to each individual officer, and the service number, budget service number, out of which that individual person is paid for every officer, sergeant, lieutenant, officer EID, sergeant EID, and lieutenant EID across the entire department, so that the council and the budget committee and I can get a better understanding of just how skewed this perspective, a perspective the budget actually gives us, how widely people are spread across where they're actually budgeted to do jobs that, the service, the service number, that part of the budget, it's a complete misrepresentation of what they're
Councilman
actually doing.
Dorsey, if you would also include me in on those deliverables.
Jim can forward you that email.
I do have the locator report for you. I can provide that quite quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Councilwoman Clark. Microphone.
Would somebody please make sure that when the information comes in that you've just described by district?
I just sent it to Councilman Scott.
I'm forward to you right now, ma'am.
Okay, if I need additions to it because I have to explain it to constituents, well, at least show it. Here's my objective. I got a lot of problems going on out there, and a lot of scared people, and a lot of people who want preventive policing, who want just visibility and being there. And that's all about how many people we've got there, out there.
Yes, ma'am.
So I just need to, I'm not going to go counting. I don't have time or the staff to count people. Thank God, thank goodness, I have colleagues who are quick enough and smart enough to do it. I just want enough people to make our communities feel as if they're not alone. So, I don't want to have to debate the issue about whether it's true or false, or I believe you. And just so it's clear enough so that we can look at it and see whether what we can do as communities to help everybody get more protection and prevention out there than we have now today. We've got great commanders. We've got great officers. I mean, not everybody at all, but a lot. It's just that they're running from place to place. We want them to be able to stand still enough to know us and not to so much protect us as prevent us from needing all that protection. So it's not a debate. It's just something clear enough and honest enough that we can work from it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Burnett.
Thank you. Just a really short question. I know we've covered a lot of ground on the staffing piece, but I felt compelled to ask again, where are we in negotiations with the sporting teams that we provide sworn police officers to help people walk across the street after an Orioles game that could otherwise be in a district?
Are you referring to like when the Oriole games, like the officers work?
We've been talking about that.
And who pays for it?
Who pays for it? And then there was some discussion around using cadets potentially, and that being a part of a negotiation with these teams. Has there been any progress on that?
Not that I'm aware of. Something I'm going to have to dig into. I don't know. Do you know who is your point person on that?
We've talked about it at every budget hearing.
It was Milton Corbett.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there was a significant number of officers that were identified as covering special events. Mm-hmm. We know that there are well over hundreds of those every year that we use sworn officers. I'm pretty sure at the last hearing of this type, back at least in June, we were told that we would have an update on the status of those negotiations. I've been asking it at every single budget opportunity I've had to get an update on where we are with that. Is there conversation happening with these teams? Because that's an additional expense that and officer staffing that I don't think has been mentioned, or I'm not quite sure how that fits into this. Is this central district? Is this sort of a special division that isn't being calculated or included in these calculations? How does that factor into this?
That doesn't affect this whatsoever. This is a patrol schedule. The special events, they pull from either overtime or people get detailed. It does not affect these numbers. These numbers are strictly for patrol. For anybody working a secondary, which we call secondary employment, to work in a baseball game, a football game, whatever their function is, it's at that facility. But the numbers that we have here, no. But there are details. I mean, we all know there are details that pop up throughout the city that we do detail officers to. Preakness, the larger events that we have to detail officers. But on a regular basis for baseball games, no, we do not detail officers out of these districts.
You want to?
Question.
Go ahead.
So is this I just heard you say Officer Corbis, I think, name. So basically, is that they go through, I'm sorry to jump on they go through, like, they're off. An officer is off. And he's going to be off. He knows that. She knows that. So they go to, like, this division of the police department that hires them out to, like, the Orioles or something.
Councilwoman, that's exactly right. With the Orioles, there is voluntary overtime that an officer can sign up for.
That's where the negotiations go on, that part of the police department?
The negotiations would exist in how, the police department is reimbursed by the Orioles organization for the overtime that is performed by the officers who sign up to do it.
Is that outside the stadium or inside the stadium?
That is.
Because I was told that there was a delineation between those 2 points, that we are reimbursed by the teams for inside the stadium, but we're not reimbursed outside the stadium.
That is for inside the stadium, exactly as you said, Councilman. With regard to the outside, and I'm not 100% sure about this, but I believe that it's usually the traffic section that provides, they serve a dual purpose, obviously. They provide security by their presence being there, but they also are directing traffic because of the ingress and egress of fans going to the games. It's a necessary function.
And I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but my understanding from previous hearings is that other municipalities, other sports teams pay for that function, both inside and outside. And a lot of this conversation has been around overtime, has been around staffing, and I think this particular issue, given how frequent we have these events, it's a significant number of days in which we're using sworn officers that are on voluntary overtime that we're not being compensated for, but people are paying tickets to go inside. So it's almost like we're subsidizing the event at a much more significant than the benefit we're getting back. I mean, there's obviously the economics of people spending money buying hot dogs and peanuts, but if we are also then not staffing patrol units in the districts, or using what could be off, we're not making it back. You get the point. And I'm just frustrated that I don't know how, I'm going to keep asking, and it's every single one of these hearings, the answer I've gotten is we haven't made any progress. It doesn't even seem like we're even talking about it.
I don't know the answer about the outside of the stadium. I'll find out for you this week and get back to you this week, absolutely.
Can you provide that to the committee as well? I guess a breakdown. Is it helpful to even have it per game so that we can sort of see where these officers aren't? And also I think it may be helpful to figure out what districts they're being pulled from.
Yes.
So that we can also get a better understanding that if you're trying to fill overtime and we're not getting, I mean, look, the point I'm trying to drive down is we need every dollar, we need every cent. And if in other municipalities, professional sports teams which receive subsidies from city government, from state government to operate their stadiums should not be receiving additional subsidy in the form of private security. I mean, we've talked about this with Hopkins. We've talked about this with other large institutions. I'm not sure why these folks are being exempted from that, and that we need every officer in neighborhoods. And if they're not going to be in a neighborhood because they're providing a necessary function, there is safety associated with that, then we should be compensated accordingly. And I just don't get it. This has literally come up and I'm not a veteran on this council, but I just don't understand how the answer hasn't moved from, for me, it doesn't seem like we're asking. And I don't, unless we can show otherwise that there is any traction on this issue, I'm going to assume that the conversation is not being had. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just so I understand, in the original spreadsheet that you provided us, can you explain to me the difference between medical line of duty and non-line of duty? Because line of duty means persons will not return to duty, is that correct?
No, a medical line of duty means that the officer was injured while working.
Oh, okay.
Yes, in his or her performance of their duties, so they were medically injured while working.
Medical non-line of duty, they fell down when they were at home.
It could have been anything. Yeah, yes, sir. Could be anything. Could be right. It could be some deadly disease. It could be anything.
So what is number 408 compared to medical and light in that spreadsheet?
So the 408 officers are the officers that are transitioning their way out of the agency. They have an X amount of time to come back, but they're in that area where they're actually transitioning away from the agency.
Because of the injury? Or?
Yes.
Okay. So that's a serious, okay, got it. So then there's medical, and then, so what's the difference between medical and light duty?
A light duty officer is an officer that is out on medical, but are able to work in a light duty capacity. It means their doctor has said that they can actually go to work. They just can't be on the street or next to anybody, have contact with anybody outside of the police department.
Got it. So number 408 is they're leaving the agency. Medical is they're not coming in the office. Light is they can come in and do some easy stuff, but not the normal physical stuff.
Yes.
Okay, got it. And then for the Chief Odell, for the 200 positions that we've identified, plus or minus, we believe are civilian functions being performed by sworn. Do we know what categories those fit into? Is that something you can get back to us on? Do we have an idea? Is that 1/3 of them are processing HR, or does it make sense?
Yes. Yeah, I can get back to you on that. I don't know off the top of my head, but it's the breadth of the department. It could be in districts at the front desk, to HR, to fiscal, to asset management, managing cars and buildings and things like that.
Got it. Thank you. Colleagues, any other budget-related questions? Okay, Chief Gillis will be in touch with you and Bob in order. Oh, do you? Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're gonna transition to public testimony in a second on this one, but Jim, Bob will be in touch. Myself, Councilman Pickett, Councilman Scott, and Kara, or someone from the Council President's office, to put together, kind of recreate this spreadsheet in a more comprehensive fashion, and then leave it to BPD to kind of plug in the numbers for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we are now going to go into public testimony. I'm going to ask that individuals keep their testimony to 2 minutes if possible. First up is Ms. Patricia Truex. Ms. Truex, if you could come up to the mic, that mic adjusts. Just remember you're being recorded on TV. Thank you, ma'am.
I'm Patricia Truex, and Council Costello, it's good to be here. I've been very much concerned about alcohol and drug abuse in our city because, I know that this is concerned when we get a lot of these incidents in our city. It's alcohol and drug related. And I know our police department is trying to do their best to deal with this because it is a huge problem. But I know that we can be addressing these issues and take it one day at a time. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Shavon Crawley.
Hey, good evening. So I'm not going to be super long, but I did want to say, with the time that I have, that the officer's name was not mentioned. The incident was addressed, but not the The incident was addressed, but not the name, and his name was Arthur Williams. And so I think that's very important that we specifically, when we talk about the incident, that officer had a name, and his name was Arthur Williams. And also well wishes to him and a speedy recovery to him as well. So what I wanted to say was that right off the bat, there seems to be a lot of confusion on this council about kind of the ins and outs of the budget. And all of that is based off of what BPD is telling you, right? You can only go by the information and the data that they give you. And then from that, you kind of try to piece together, you know, hey, Shannon, whatever it is that they give you. And so I guess the only thing that briefly I have to say is, if you're not entirely sure about something, don't vote on it. I mean, you know, this is not the first time that BPD has brought forth information to you all that was skewed or that was a blatant lie, incorrect information. This seems to be a constant pattern, almost like a scam. You know, we have these hearings and they come forth with information, and the information is really never accurate. And, you know, only 3 people voted no for the fiscal year budget 2019, where BPD is set to get $510 million. That's not counting the money that they get when they confiscate drugs. The last hearing that I was at, they talked about the money going into 4 different bank accounts, and none of those bank accounts were ever, they never shared the significance of any of those. And so that's something you should look into, is where is that money going that they confiscate during drug raids. But, you know, only 3 people voted no for that, and so it's kind of hard for me to believe that, you know, you really are concerned about where the money's going and how the money's being spent when, you know, you vote yes on such a fiscally irresponsible plan. And that just goes back to the larger portion of policing in general. Policing in general is skewed, but especially when we talk about money and the way that we spend that money. That's all I wanted to say. And, you know, when I run for city council in 2020 and hopefully win, I would like to be a part of that change where we go from hyper-policing and over-policing to actual changes. And if that means, you know, disbanding and starting over, that's something that we need to seriously consider as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Crawley, I'll point out that the council, specifically Councilman Stokes, has introduced a resolution to look at confiscated weapons, contraband substances, money, et cetera, and that is an open resolution. Okay, colleagues, any more questions budget related? Okay, we're going to transition to the next part. So this hearing is in recess until Wednesday, September 5th, 5 p.m. We're going to go in recess for 2 minutes, and then we'll reconvene under the Public Safety Committee.